Leticia James, new trouble for this lady, okay? So there are these ethics complaints now that are mounting against her. And if you recall, we went through this recently the other day where we were talking about just exactly what's at stake here. You see, she applied for a loan that was federally backed. So this is like within the federal government's jurisdiction, right? Pam Bondi saying, gee, thank you very much. I appreciate this information coming forward. This is all about an application she made for a loan back in Norfolk, Virginia. And she said at that time that this property was her principal residence, Norfolk, Virginia. Last time I checked, Norfolk, Virginia was quite a ways, shall we say, from none other than New York, Albany, New York, where she is the Attorney General. And being the Attorney General and being an attorney, that comes with a certain kind of expectation, shall we say. Lawyers are expected to uphold the law. Kind of like the judge out in Wisconsin that somehow took it upon herself to escort somebody who was believed to have engaged in domestic violence outside the courtroom because she didn't want him getting picked up by ICE, right? Taking matters into her own hands. And now the DOJ is pursuing that one, FBI as well. So this is kind of a similar thing, right? Leticia James getting a mortgage in Virginia and yet living in the state of New York and getting special privileges because she claimed erroneously that she lived in Virginia and that it would be her principal residence. So at this moment, the New York bar is considering these allegations against her and considering the filing of this ethics complaint by none other than America First, which is the legal arm, used to be run by none other than Stephen Miller. We know he's in the White House now. This sort of legal entity that was looking to protect some of Donald Trump's interest. They went and filed this ethics complaint, and the ethics complaint is asking the New York bar to say, hey, wait a second. If this woman is guilty of having massaged the record, so to speak, or just downright lying, right? I mean, if you say you are going to live in Virginia so that you can get a better mortgage rate, but you're actually living in New York, then that would be kind of a problem. Now, these are just allegations at this point, but as this issue moves forward, as the DOJ continues its investigation, because now they've been alerted thanks to Pulte, well, then they may have a decision to make there in the state of New York. Now, Leticia wants you to know nothing to see her. She went on one of those MSNBC people that looks like a carbon copy of Rachel Maddow. Do you notice that? They all look alike, every single one of them. Anyway, she went on with this particular person, the male version, imagine that, of Rachel Maddow, who has a podcast and says she's not even going to dignify this, right? She's not going to respond to these allegations about mortgage fraud. Come on, give me a break.
I will respond to these baseless allegations at the appropriate time and in the appropriate way, but I am 100% confident that it will not result in any criminal indictment or action against me, and that it is nothing more than a revenge tour, and that Donald Trump just ultimately got to the J's, and I was next.
The key allegation, again, it sounds like you don't want to address them here, but I'm just going to put it out so people understand that a property that was owned in Virginia, and a mortgage that you signed, if I'm not mistaken, for that property, that they say you falsely represented yourself as a resident of Virginia, and that was essentially amounts to mortgage fraud since you're a resident of New York. What is your response to that?
It's baseless. Everybody knows I'm a resident of New York, specifically Brooklyn. And again, we will respond at the appropriate time in the appropriate way to these baseless allegations. And some media outlets like the Daily News over the weekend has indicated as much.
That's all you want to say?
That's all that I'm going to say.
Yeah, and he's not going to push her on it, right? Because, oh gosh, she may not come back on his lovely little podcast. Heaven forbid, we can't book Leticia James. My gosh. You know what? Nobody's willing to ask her the hard questions. You know what really bugs me about this? The media's not willing to cover it at all. I mean, where have you seen this? Other than my show? I mean, honestly, like they've just dropped the thing. Like they're not even bothering with this story. Maybe a few times here and there on Fox or Newsmax, But for the most part, the mainstream media wants nothing to do with this. They think that this is somehow all fictitious. Look, I'm looking at these allegations, and guys, you don't put your dad down as your husband when you're applying for a loan. Oh, unless you're Ilhan Omar and you're doing something. Right? I mean, there's that whole issue. I digress. I guess that's all alleged too. But anyway, in this particular case, I'm still stuck on the fact, and you just go back to these allegations, and by the way, the America First team did an excellent job outlining them here. Additionally, they ran on another occasion, Ms. James appears to have misrepresented the number of dwelling units in a multi-dwelling building that she owned. She actually represented them as a different number because apparently you get a federally backed mortgage if you have a certain amount versus another. I mean, wow. So you're talking about manipulating your documents, manipulating facts in order to get federal funds. I mean, heck, Donald Trump, at least he was out there working with a private bank, for goodness sakes. I mean, she went after him to the tune of nearly it's over 500 million. What am I saying? $500 million, right? Leticia James trying to insist that somehow Donald Trump was guilty because he inflated the square footage on his house. I mean, 4 or 5 dwellings. In her case, you had to deflate. She couldn't admit she had 5, but she apparently did have 5. I mean, that's pretty wild when you think about it. It's pretty wild. I mean, it's incredible what she was able to get away with. This was a private transaction, ladies and gentlemen, right? Private transaction, and yet she was out there trying to bankrupt the guy if only she could. I remember it all so well.
4 days after a judge ordered Donald Trump to pay $355 million for a decade of fraud, New York Attorney General Leticia James says she's prepared to do everything she can to make sure the former president pays his fine, including, she told us, seizing the buildings that bear his name.
If he does not have funds to pay off the judgment, then we will seek, judgment enforcement mechanisms in court, and we will ask the judge to seize his assets.
Okay, so maybe we can seize yours, right, Leticia? I mean, if you did what is being alleged, you did, and what is being alleged is actually pretty darn serious, okay? Pretty darn serious. Again, she's kind of flipping out about this. And I think that she's using this new lawsuit, saying, oh, we need money for HHS. You've got to give this money to us. She's using this new lawsuit as a way to distract. Look at this shiny toy over here. Okay, let's go after Trump again. I mean, she promised she'd go after him. She was so proud. She went after him 100 times before. Maybe she can double it this time around, 200 times after Donald Trump, and maybe another 500 million while we're at it. So she's going after HHS and saying, hey, we need this money, we need this money, we need this money. She's done it in various different ways before. Already we've seen the Supreme Court actually uphold the idea that, no, you know what? He doesn't just blanketly have to give you money. You need to be able to actually answer the questions that the federal government is asking you so that they can make sure, those in the federal government, that your policies are in line with what they have decided upon. Again, Fed versus state. This is what's fascinating about all of this right now, because we're coming to a moment in time where it's bubbling up into kind of, dare I say, civil war scenario. In other words, she wants to just keep going up against the federal government, up against the federal government, up against them. Oh, we're not going to give you the people from Rikers Island. Forget about it, right? We're going to protect everybody that's here in the state of New York, even if they're here illegally, even if they're a criminal. Well, that doesn't fly. Again, just go back to the Constitution. Go look at the Constitution, Leticia James. You're supposed to be a lawyer from, Howard University, which you keep telling us over and over again. Well, if you are so smart, go read the Constitution, and there it is that you will see if there's one power the federal government has, it is to control our border and to control who is here in the country, period, full stop. Anyway, she's in all kinds of trouble. So what is she trying to do? She's trying to distract with this new lawsuit, all while saying that she's not guilty, she's not guilty. But I think, and when I show you this next soundbite of her just less than 24 hours ago, freaking out, flipping out, like totally unleashed, I think what this shows us is that she's getting scared. As well she should be, right? Take a look.
And you want me to sit in my seat and stand idly by and allow this craziness to happen? You could come after me if you want, But you elected me to stand up. You elected me to use the law. You elected me to go to court. You elected me to continue to challenge this administration. You elected me to stand up for the least of God's children. You elected me to continue fighting on. And I will fight on.
You'll fight, you'll fight, you'll fight, you'll fight. I mean, she's just unhinged in that video. Again, unhinged, but I think it has everything to do, ladies and gentlemen, with the fact that she's frightened. And that's why you're seeing lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. Oh, in addition, she kind of wants to get some political capital, right? Here she is, as you saw in that video, totally unhinged. And here is, I want to show you one Jonathan Turley, who's an American University law scholar, talking about how she is trying to pivot and how she really doesn't have any room to run on this new lawsuit that she has filed. Let's listen in.
Jonathan, I want to get your take on this one more thing before we go here. The Minneapolis Attorney's Office apparently wants prosecutors there to consider race as part of their thought process, decision-making when negotiating plea deals. Now, this is the Hennepin County Attorney, Mary Moriarty. As you know, she was elected, after the George Floyd riots, during that progressive movement, to put in DAs and attorneys that would be a little bit more lenient. I imagine you have a lot of thoughts on this.
Well, she's ripping the blindfold off Lady Justice. And the whole idea of justice is that it is supposed to be blind. It's supposed to be based on the facts of the case. It's supposed to make victims not whole, but at least give them some vindication or some assistance for what was done to them. And this is, I think, going to really force the issue again, not just with the administration, but with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court just said not long ago that in college admissions, when you rely on race criteria, you're engaging in racial discrimination. And that's an even greater concern when we have race criteria being used in this way in the criminal justice system.
I wonder if this came up when she decided not to go after a Walt staffer who apparently allegedly vandalized a Tesla vehicle, or at least 6 of them. So I wonder if that was part of the thought process there. Jonathan Turley, thanks so much for joining us.
It's really kind of interesting. And as I said, I think that new video that just came out within the last 24 hours really points to how stressed this woman is about where she is. I do believe that she is worried, and she is worried because she's going to lose her law license. And if she loses her law license, guess what? She's not going to be practicing as Attorney General for the state of New York. Don't forget, this came up about 10 months ago or so. Do you remember when Elise Stefanik, the congresswoman from New York, came forward and filed an ethics complaint against Leticia James? In that particular case, it was because, wow, she was just really egregious in terms of her going after Donald Trump, using everything she could for political purposes, right? Going after him with a very deliberate effort, even though she told you that wasn't the case. She tried to tell you, oh, no, this has nothing to do with anything. I'm not going after him just because he's Donald Trump. I'm going after him because I have to go. No. Are you kidding me? She went after him for one reason and one reason.
The President of the United States has complained that I'm engaging in some sort of political witch hunt, that I've got some personal vendetta against him, that I campaigned against him. That is not true. This illegitimate president who sits in the White House.
That president, because he's not my president, he's an illegitimate president. His days are numbered. His days are numbered.
We've got to get ready to mobilize, and we've got to get ready to agitate and irritate until victory is won, but more importantly, until Trump is defeated. We will all rise up and resist this man, and ultimately we'll bring him down. This illegitimate president, I'm going to give you the same level of respect that you gave to President Obama, and that is absolutely no respect at all.
Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey.
Okay, you get the picture, right? In other words, she's out there saying, oh, I'm not doing this for political reasons. Well, what do you know? Of course she was doing it for political reasons. Like, nobody was born yesterday. And so what's happening now? Payback. Payback. Elise Stefanik wanted her to be examined for overly aggressive use of her attorney general's position, right? You can't have an environment where politicians are going after opposing party members just because they don't want them in office. She wanted to make sure that he could never run again. Well, they put a few people in charge of that, right? You had Alvin Bragg doing that. You had Jack Smith doing that. You had Fannie Willis and her BF down there in Georgia trying to do that. Nobody was successful. I mean, the amazing thing, right, is he is now the president of the United States. So Letitia, honey, baby, I am sorry. This is a totally different round. This time around, you've got Stephen Miller in a pretty big position. You've got America First, which has had 4 years to look at all this stuff. So absolutely, when they're filing an ethics complaint against you, I'd be nervous too, right? Of course you're nervous. You're completely at risk now for losing your law license. With the Elise Stefanik complaint, I want to just explain, like, it was a little bit different. It was a little bit different because you would have had to have had the court making the decision, which I believe they could come to at the appellate level, that she was overly egregious in terms of how she went after him, and it was for political reasons only. But that's a leap. In this particular case, there is no leap. In other words, if they're able to prove out these allegations of mortgage fraud, if she tried to defraud federal taxpayers by lying about where she lived or lying about her marriage status, then gosh darn it, I think you got a good darn reason there, even in the state of New York, even with all the liberal lawyers there, to absolutely disbar Leticia James, the Attorney General of the state of New York. And boom, presto, there goes her law license, there goes her AG position. I don't know what she does next. Maybe they'll try and run her. Well, that would be funny.